It's exactly this. It was a report that was put out at the request, at the behest of the then Chancellor, now the current Prime Minister, which asked us to examine the case for action on climate change and to do so in a completely independent manner. And we did. We didn't have any predispositions on climate change. We came at this completely afresh. We had some scientists on the team, but for the most part, we were economists, and so we had to review the science as it was presented to us, and it's the science that drives the report. And what we found, and indeed what we found very, very quickly when looking into the science, was that the costs of inaction, i.e., not doing anything about climate change, would vastly exceed the costs of action. And that was essentially the key message that we brought back to the review. And since then, it has received quite a lot of publicity. At first, it was seen as a controversial position to take. I think now it's very much seen as a mainstream position to take. And indeed, if anything, the science has actually moved on to the extent that we probably underestimated the costs of inaction, some of the risks that we are putting the world to. But the story about the costs of action remains the same. We have the technologies. Where they don't exist, we can invest in bringing them about and set up the right policy frameworks. The problem is not technologies. The problem is political will and cultures and institutions. I mean, it was an economic assessment. Again, the economics is driven by the science. It's a scientific story. But what we found was that the attempts to value the impacts of doing nothing, indeed, and the impacts of doing something, up until that point had been partial. They've been very good, but they've been partial. There are many aspects to the climate change story. It has impacts that go beyond just economic production, although that's important, especially in agriculture. They go beyond just the cost of building adaptive measures, reinforcing seawalls, irrigation, water management. They extend into human health, they extend into the environment, ultimately they extend into potentially conflict, refugees, migration. If Bangladesh increasingly is underwater, if big parts of Western and Southern Asia are faced with water stress, and parts of Africa as well, that will lead to conflict inevitably. So there's all sorts of human, environmental and economic impacts that form part of the story. Also an important part of the story which hadn't been addressed adequately prior to our review was the nature of uncertainty. If there is a 1 in 10 chance or less of a catastrophe, and the IPCC incidentally tell us that there is a 1 in 10 chance of temperatures rising by 6 degrees on average over the next 100 years or so if we don't act. 6 degrees doesn't sound like very much, by the way, but to put it in perspective, the last ice age, the world's temperature was only 4 or 5 degrees colder, and we would have been under a glacier here, New York as well. The last time the world was 4, 5, 6 degrees warmer was more than 50 million years ago, well before humanity was on the planet. A period characterized by jungles and swampy forests and alligators on the poles. Now, if we're going to see those kinds of temperatures over 100 years, it seriously compromises our existence as a species to exist on our ability as a species to. It seriously compromises our ability as a species to exist on this planet. It will dramatically change the physical and human geography of the Earth. So, if we're talking about those kinds of risks, then we need to value how we approach risk. We may be in a situation where the mean expectation is not so bad for some countries. It's bad, actually, for a lot of the most vulnerable parts of the world. But maybe for Northern Europe, North America, some of the richer parts, the average expectation over the next 100 years is not so bad. But even we face a 1 in 10 chance of something utterly disastrous. So we took risk explicitly, and we addressed how we approached risk. And a lot of us care about low probability, high impact events. And so we actually quantified that explicitly in the review. The principle being a bit like your house. If you know that the insurance companies make money out of you insuring your house, it probably won't burn down, but the chance that it may burn down inclines you to pay a little bit of money each year to insure against that. It's very much the same with the Earth. If there's a small chance of something utterly catastrophic, then we may want to commit some resources now to prevent that risk.